Good evening, knife junkies. James here from Feel the Burr. Tonight I've got to show you a mini bug out clone straight from China via AliExpress. Took about 8 weeks to get to me. I decided to order it when I was ordering another knife. Saw it at the last minute, thought it looked interesting, and it arrived with me about a day before I went camping for a week recently. I've only just come back from that camping trip. When it first arrived, I wasn't that impressed, to be honest. It was smaller than I thought. I didn't realise the mini bug out was so small. It is an exact replica of the original size-wise, so it's about, about just over 6 inches open, with a blade length of around 2 3/4 inches. So it uses the same access lock as Benchmade, which is now, I gather, open for other people to use, but this is without a doubt an out and out clone of the original, even down to the butterfly logo. I guess if you'd never picked up an original, you could be mistaken for thinking that these were the real thing. That's partly why I ordered it in the colour scheme that I did. Benchmade don't make it in this colour. Sorry for the poor focus. They don't make it in gold and black as far as I've seen. So I thought if I was going to order a clone, I know some people can be really funny about these being shown on YouTube, it was better to get it in a colour that wasn't original, therefore it can never be sold as an original. In actual fact, this one comes in a handle material that's not offered on the original either. I think the original was Grivery, type of plastic, I guess. This is actually metal, which does overcome one problem that I've seen other people talk about on their YouTube videos of the mini bug out. Never held one in hand myself. I've not had the original, but they did report that the scales flex, that you can push them together, and you can't on this one because it's metal. But that being said, it's not a quality feeling metal. It feels like the old Chinese knives that we used to have as a kid with the unknown blade steels. It's just got a bit of a cheap feeling to it. Obviously it's got the black coated blade like much of the originals, and I did suspect when I first picked this up that this may be like some of the other more expensive knives that I've seen, where the black starts to rub off as soon as you're even cutting through cardboard. See, on the other side, you've got the S30V logo, if I can get it to focus. Same as the original. Obviously, this blade is not going to be S30V. I think this was $20, so it worked out about £18 delivered to the door. Now, the original is going in this country from Heine Haynes anywhere between £115 and £135, depending on which colour scheme that you go for. But I was intrigued to find out. I suspect this blade may well be D2. The reason I say that is A, because the Chinese are using a lot of D2 on their knives at the moment. It's not a problem for the Chinese to get hold of D2. I know they do use a lot of HCR13 when things are tested, but they also use a lot of D2. I got this knife while I was ordering this one, which is a brilliant knife. Really like this, the Bearfly. It's advertised as D2. I gather it's been tested as D2. My Carter scales, I'll do a separate review on that. It's a brilliant knife. So this knife came from the same seller, which is why I had an inkling that this blade may be D2. Could be wrong, maybe HCR13. But as I say, it arrived a day before I left for a camping trip, week-long camping trip. I was staying in the back of my pickup truck for a week, and I thought it would probably blunt within the first couple of days, but what the hell, I'll take it with me as my main knife. I did take a Mora with me just in case, but I used this as much as I could as my main knife all week. I didn't take a sharpener with me. I just wanted to see how it would hold up. And as I say, I didn't expect much from it, to be honest. I thought it would probably blunt within the first day and the coating would come off within the first couple of days, but actually I was relatively surprised by it. I used it for opening packages, cutting down cardboard. I even used it for shaving wood down to get at the fat wood in the knots of pine trees. Anyone who's done that knows how hard that stuff is. It's resin, so wood. If anything's going to blunt your knife, it's that. It did that. It put up with that okay, and actually none of that damaged whatever this black coating is on the blade. You can see there is some damage to it now, and that was actually caused when I decided to start torture testing it, and I tried cutting up aluminium cans, which is not something I would usually do with one of my knives, but I just wanted to see how it would stand up. And that's the only thing. You can see there's a scratch there, there's a few chips in the black coating, but not actually bad considering it was cutting through metal. And having spent the whole week away doing all of those things, I even used it I locked myself out of the truck. I used it to pry the corner part off my window so I could get through the door seal to unlock the truck. I did bend the tip ever so slightly, but it really got given some abuse this week. And surprisingly, by the time I got back, yes, it needs a sharpen. It's got some spots along the blade where it's a bit sticky, but it is still cutting paper, which isn't bad. That goes to show that this isn't some super cheap, useless steel that blunts the first time you put it through a few pieces of cardboard. Obviously, it's not going to be anything like S30V, but you know, a lot of people don't have 115 to 135 pounds to spend on a small knife like this. So for somebody who's just wanting to see whether a knife that this size, this design, is going to suit them, perhaps before they buy the original, or perhaps they have to, you can only stick with the 18-pound knife. It will do. I mean, as I say, it got me through the week. It will do a day's work quite easily. It works as a knife. Not as good as the original, but it works as a knife. It's not completely terrible. Obviously, there is some quality issues which you probably wouldn't find on the original Benchmade. If you look at this metal handle, you can see where they've got the holes for the reversible pocket clip. They've drilled through from the other side, which is actually dented the metal. It's pushed it out slightly. It's those kind of small finish issues. You can tell from the thumb stud that that's not an original Benchmade, but otherwise, it's not too bad. And the action, it feels a bit cheap, I must admit. It flicks out okay. It's a bit sticky as it closes. I have opened this up. It seems to be running on brass washers rather than bronze washers, but it opens and closes all right. So I say it does function as a knife. My main problem with this, and the reason why I won't be buying an original Benchmade in this format, is the size, really. I mean, in this country, we are allowed to carry lock knives. There's certain restrictions on what we can carry as EDC knives every day. For those who don't know, the blade length needs to be under 3 inches. It can't be locking. You can't have automatic knives. I think we've got some of the harshest restrictions in the world, but that doesn't mean that we can't carry lock knives. It just means that if you are carrying a lock knife, you need to have a good reason for it. So if you're going camping or you're working, you need a locking blade, you can still carry one, but if you get stopped by the police, you would be expected to provide a reasonable explanation for why you've got that knife on you. Otherwise, you could be prosecuted for having a dangerous weapon in a public place. It's not good news. So for me, if I'm going to carry a lock knife, if I have good reason to carry a lock knife in this country, I'm not going to carry something that small. I'm just not. I'm probably going to take something more like the Bearfly with the extra blade length. It's a more substantial knife, and that's my main issue. That, and it has nowhere near the action or the quality of the Bearfly. It is a cheap copy. But I suppose for those who are just more interested in something that looks like a Benchmade, form over function, it may float your boat. As I say, I know a lot of people hate these clones. They don't want to see them on YouTube, but I'm not one for censorship. I think the Chinese are going to continue to copy these designs. There's nothing that we can do about it. And actually, their manufacturing process, if you think about the amount of work that's gone into that, to tool to create an exact replica of a knife like that, only to sell it for £18 delivered to the other side of the world, it just goes to show how far they've come. The quality has stepped up in general, not necessarily with that knife, but in their others. They are good knives in their own right, not for Chinese knives, but good knives full stop. I love the Bearfly. It's become one of my favourites at the moment. The Chinese are really giving us something to think about with the materials, value for money. I gather these have been tested as real D2. A big D2 blade, micarta handles, steel liners, nicely made, great action, and I think that was 20 quid. So if you're going to get that from a European or American manufacturer, something equivalent, you're going to be paying 4 times that easily for something equivalent. And that's really got to be giving us something to think about. And I know people will say they don't agree, that's because of the different labour laws in China, but I don't think it's all that. I don't know the ins and outs of the knife industry. I'm no expert, but there must be an element of profit within all this as well. I don't think it can purely be down to the harsher labour laws within China. Size comparison, as I say, it is a small knife. So the closest I've got is probably something like the Pilar, which is a little bit shorter, although I much prefer it. I would say the closest thing size-wise that I have is Real Steel Luna. It's almost identical in blade length and handle length. That said, this would be a much better knife if I hadn't have gone for this cheap alloy handle material. I think it would have been much better in something more, something closer to the original. But I didn't want this knife ever to be sold if it leaves my hands to somebody as an original. So I wanted to get it in a colour and material that's not going to be mistaken for the original. Make of it what you will, really. I mean, I've got to say, I was surprised by it. For something that feels like a cheap knife, it actually stood up okay over the week, which is why I think it may be D2. I did use and abuse this over the week, and it's still cutting paper. It needs a good sharp, and it's got some spots on it, but it is still cutting paper. So as I say, for those who maybe just want to see if they're going to like the original mini bug out size wise before they buy it, or for those who can't stretch to the £115 to £135 for the mini bug out in this country, perhaps that will be a good option. Personally, I wouldn't bother, not in this country anyway. I would put in the extra couple of quid, and that's all it is, for one of the bigger ones. Search on YouTube for the ones that have been tested to show that they are what they say they are. This was one of them. I think petrified fish, CH knives. There are people on YouTube that are doing the testing, and they can point you towards the Chinese knives that are the materials that they say they are, because that's I guess one thing that you never know when you're buying from places like AliExpress. You're taking the seller on their word. Unless you send that knife off to have it tested, you can't be sure what the blade steel is. Could be D2, maybe HCR13. There's some even worse steels out there that have been found, particularly on the cheapest of the Chinese knives. But it's an interesting thing, nonetheless. Oh, but the biggest issue that I found when this first arrived, I must point out, is that actually if you apply enough pressure on the back of this without holding the lock, it does break. So that, however they finish the end of that blade, it's not engaging fully with that access lock. I stripped it down. There's brass washers in here rather than bronze. I couldn't see why this wasn't fully engaging. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me. I'll probably never use this as a lock knife again. I wonder if I could get away with adding it to my EDC rotation as a beta knife, given that it's not technically a lock knife. It's more like a strong D10. Don't know whether I could get away with that or not. But for those interested in the clones, that's the mini bugout. Not made by Benchmade, but looks a bit like it was. Anyway, ta-ta.